Welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host Harrison Scullin, and today I'll be discussing Penny's Serenade from 1941, starring Cary Grant and Irene Dunne, directed by George Stevens. Alright, so now some behind the scenes details about Penny's Serenade from 1941. This is the third of three movies that were all major hits, which paired Cary Grant and Irene Dunne playing spouses, following The Awful Truth from 1937 and My Favorite Wife from 1940. Irene Dunne would express regret that she and Grant had no further collaborations, stating that their respective schedules nixed any reteaming. However, Grant openly admitted that subsequent to being second billed in Penny's Serenade, he'd insist on top billing in all of his films, a prerogative Dunne would not be willing to concede. Alright, so those are some behind the scenes details about Penny's Serenade. I think it's pretty interesting hearing how they were in three films together, and just kind of the relationships that they had in each of them. And I've only seen two of the three. I have not seen My Favorite Wife yet, but this film versus The Awful Truth, they are super different films. And the type of relationships they have in each of them is very different too. So it's very interesting seeing how great chemistry they have on screen. And I'll get into that later, but you could really tell they had a great time working together. All right, so now I'll get into my thoughts on the plot. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I thought it was amazing. I love how it shows how realistic the relationship is. Because, I'm one of those people that's like, I don't want Hollywood movies to be exactly like real life, because we want the movies to be an escape. We want them to be something we can all appreciate and kind of relate to, right? But every once in a while, though, I think it is good to see a film like this where it's actually very realistic, where the husband and wife, they don't always get along, and they have ups and downs. And like Cary Grant, for example, he plays a character that is super ambitious, and he's very entrepreneurial, and then Irene Dunne just wants to be kind of like a housewife. So it's interesting seeing their relationship blossom and develop. And I love the method that they use for telling the story. They told us it in a flashback, and it unravels as we go along. When we start out, we have no idea what's going on, but as I get more into it, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. But I really love this plot, really good story, and a very satisfying conclusion. I love that the tragedy of their daughter's death is what brings them together. I love that. I thought that was a beautiful moment and a beautiful, very satisfying ending. Alright, so talking about the acting, I also gave that a 5 out of 5. It was excellent. I loved Cary Grant. I love Irene Dunne. I think they have great chemistry. And I love, like I was mentioning, how The Awful Truth is very different from this one. That one's more of a screwball comedy, whereas this one is more of a serious drama with comedic elements in it. And I love that, because it shows kind of how talented of actors these guys were. The best scene with Cary Grant is he's making and pleading the case with the judge why he should keep their foster daughter and, adopt her, because I guess at that time, I don't know if this is still the case or even ever was, but in the story, they can't keep the daughter that they've adopted because, he's not making any money. He can't prove that he could actually provide for the child, so they take the child. And he pleads his case, and it's a very beautiful scene. It's a very more dramatic and serious scene, because Cary Grant, for the most part, he did more comedic films, at least the ones I've seen so far. So it was really interesting seeing him being a little bit more serious and being a little bit more emotional. I really liked that. I thought that was excellent. And then the scenes for Irene Dunne that I really liked, she's great in several, that are kind of one big scene kind of spliced up throughout, is when we're first introduced to her, she's using these, records, like for a record player, and she's going through like a photo album, and it says like, baby's first steps, or, all these different things. And you're like, I wonder what each of these different segments mean. And she pulls out a record and plays it. And then kind of the episode in their life where the song fits in kind of plays it out. And we see that she looks kind of sad, and we don't know why. Because it's like, well, this looks like a happy thing. I wonder what's making her sad or a little melancholic. I loved it. I thought it was excellent how they set up the story and how they acted and whatnot. They were perfect in these roles. Much different from The Awful Truth. Okay, talking about directing, I gave that a 5 out of 5. I thought it was incredible. I mean, I was mentioning with, the acting and whatnot. I thought it was a very clever way of looking back at the history of a couple and their relationship as it grows through the perspective of song records. I thought that was really, really clever, and I love the scenarios he has set up for it. And, each episode is kind of different, kind of in tone and in how it's set up. Like when we first meet him, it's a little bit more of a rom-com, a little bit of a screwball comedy. But then, like, the middle section of the movie is more of a dramatic film. And then at the end, we're back to the happy romance. And I love that. I love how it all kind of works together. And there's a very clever way of doing this story. All right, so for cinematography and special effects, I gave that a 4 out of 5. To me, this was kind of the weak point of the film. Not that I didn't think it wasn't creative. I loved the overlaying shots over the records and all that. I thought they were really clever, and they kind of zoom out to fill the screen. I thought that was really cool. The only scene I didn't like as much was the earthquake one. It felt a little too over the top for me. A little too ridiculous. I mean, it ends up being a tragedy. She was pregnant at the time, and it results in a miscarriage, and it's very, very sad for them, and kind of begins the sad life that they live for a good chunk of the film. But like I said, it's more realistic. It was a little over the top, I'm not going to lie, and it wasn't as realistic as the rest of the film. But other than that, I thought they did fantastic here. I love the montages and all of that. It was a beautifully put together film. I was very impressed with it. All right, so talking about the music, I gave that a 5 out of 5. I loved it. It was incredible. I love how each song kind of sets up the scene and fits in with the different segments of their lives. I thought it was really, really good. And even if I don't remember any of the songs in particular off the top of my head, I do remember, though, the feeling that these songs were setting up what was going to happen next. And I love that. I love that kind of discovering what this story is through music. I thought it was a beautiful and creative way of learning more about these characters. All right, so tallying that all up, that brings my Letterboxd score to a 4.8 out of 5, which I'm rounding to a 5 out of 5. So would I recommend this movie? Absolutely. I think this has some of the most relatable relationships on screen I've seen, especially in the classic Hollywood era. It's not a super screwball comedy or anything like that. But like I was mentioning earlier, every once in a while we need a film like this that's a little bit more realistic with relationships, because they get married like at the beginning of the film. This whole movie is not a happily ever after where they end up getting married. This is, okay, we're married, now let's build this romance and this life together. And it feels very realistic. My wife and I enjoyed it and kind of related a lot to it. And that's why I think it's a great romance, because it's a lot more relatable, and I think a lot of people would appreciate it. Even through the tragedies, they were able to work it out. But they had some real quarrels and some real discuss. They had some real arguments and real things that tore apart of the relationship. But them being able to work together and to work through it was really beautiful to me. Because there are tragedies in life that occur, and sometimes it can make or break a relationship. So it was really, really awesome seeing that through that tragedy, they were able to find peace and reconciliation together. I love them. So yes, I am absolutely recommending this movie, and I recommend watching it after seeing The Awful Truth, because The Awful Truth is a screwball comedy. They're really funny together, and then this one's a little bit more of a serious film. It has some comedic moments, but it's definitely more serious than The Awful Truth is. In fact, when you look at this relationship here, it almost makes the one in The Awful Truth a little bit more petty. I reviewed it, I think a year or two ago. The reason why they're getting divorced is because they're not talking to each other, and so 90 days the divorce will be finalized or whatever. And it's just, which sounds kind of crazy and terrible, but it's a silly movie, it's a screwball comedy. But this one is a much more serious, dramatic film. So I guess it depends what you're more interested in. Do you want to see more of a drama, or you want to see more of a comedy? But I recommend what I did, which is watching Awful Truth first, and then this one second, just to kind of compare the two and kind of see the range that Irene Dunn and Cary Grant had as actors. So, yeah, I loved it. I'm definitely going to purchase this and have a copy of it. It's an excellent movie that I think I'll keep watching for years to come. All right, those are my thoughts for Penny Serenade from 1941. Thank you so much for watching and listening to today's episode. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Really Old Movies, where I discuss details about the week's particular film. New podcast episodes are released Saturdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music, and Mondays on YouTube and Rumble at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Alright, thank you so much. This has been Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin. Take care.